Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Ichikawa. I'm the Executive Director of the Berkeley Food Institute. I'm really so grateful to be here. We are co-conveners of this summit and this briefing, along with American University, Center for Environment, Community Equity, as well as Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center, and the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund. I want to just give a little background on why we came here and what our objective is today. We came here to bear witness. We came here to not be intimidated by the structure of this building that is made to exclude, but we know belongs to us. We're here because we have friends here, and we know that this farm bill is ours, and it's been many years in the making. I want to give a little bit of background. For those of you who might know or have been involved in the Farm Bill for a long time, you know that it's been kept to a small group of people for a long time. And often the farm bills would pass sort of quickly because there was a small group of people who knew each other and just pushed the thing along, nice and efficient. I would say about maybe 10, 15 years ago, it started getting more complicated because more people started knocking on the door saying, hey, I'm here, this affects me, and I want to have a say in it. And I think that's a good thing. The whole process slowed way down. And I'm proud to say that we've been a part of this. In 2017, Berkeley Food Institute and American University teamed up to have the first Farm Bill Summit. We called it Policy, Politics, and Potential. We really wanted to open up the Farm Bill to a much wider swath of Americans and people internationally. Scholars, activists, students, farmers, ranchers, fisher people, refugees, immigrants, people who had been excluded from the Farm Bill up to then. And we had an amazing gathering up on American University's campus where people could, again, really bear witness to what the Farm Bill meant to them and how they had visions to change it. And we also tried to ride the line between the practical and the possible, right? We know that there's always little tweaks that need to be made in certain titles, and that's important. And it's important to envision a much grander future and not be constrained by the mores of the past. So we tried to do both things at once. It was great fun, and we also just mainly tried to avoid feeling frustrated by the intentional intimidation of the very lengthy Farm Bill, and bring some joy into the process. We've come back again here 5 years later. We had a wonderful meeting over the last few days out at Airlie Farm in Warrenton, Virginia, and it was a chance for us to really think about another new and important way to look at the Farm Bill. We called our gathering Pointing the Farm Bill Toward Racial Justice. So today's objective is really, we're trying to understand how to do that. I would say that the Farm Bill has, of course, very racist roots. And just a few years ago, some people started to say, well, let's think about how we can change that around the edges. Add a program here or a program there, and that's important. But it's 2023, and I think that this group of people and many across the country and the world are thinking the edges are really not sufficient. We must point the entire Farm Bill toward racial justice. So I'm really grateful that we have some of the nation's leaders and experts who have come together to offer their ideas on how we're going to get there. So let's have a really rich and engaging discussion. Let's ask each other questions. Let's debate about strategy, but I'll just say one thing I don't think that will be disputed here is that the Farm Bill must be pointed towards racial justice if we are going to achieve the food systems goals we have, as well as the democracy goals that we have. So if you don't agree with that premise, then you probably will have a hard time here. But the minutia of strategy, let's get into that. So I'll just give a little overview of the day, and we are going to be here in and out until 12 noon because there is so much to cover, so please come in and out as your needs require. We'll have a series of 20-minute presentations, and I'll try to squeeze in maybe one question at the end of each presentation, but we're trying to keep it moving. And then we're going to have a big, longer Q&A from 11:20 to 11:50. So if you have to leave and try to come back then by 11:20 so we can have a more general conversation about all the titles. How does that sound? Does anyone have any questions? By the way, I'll also say that we're joined by a wonderful group of students from American University and from UC Berkeley, undergrads and graduate students. Also, part of our objective is to really train the next generation and inspire the next generation to consider the Farm Bill theirs. So if you get a chance to sit next to a student, please introduce yourself, offer them a job, or offer them a visit to your farm, or bring them in. Bring them in because, we really believe in intergenerational learning at the Berkeley Food Institute. And so if you have something to teach, please teach it. Or if you have something to learn, please ask that question, because these students are our future. We had many more students back in California we had to leave behind. We couldn't afford to bring, but many students are very excited, and I hope some of them will be joining on the live stream. So know that there is high anticipation for what our speakers are going to say. So without further ado, I'd like to invite in our first speaker. First speakers, yes, please.
I just wanted to ask, are there some visits set up for this afternoon?
Yes, there are visits set up for this afternoon, and for the Federation members. Maybe I'll have the Federation, maybe I'll have Dãnia explain that. So that's separate from this briefing. Yeah, but she'll probably explain that. So our first speakers will be talking about heirs property, land access, and credit, Title V of the Farm Bill. They will be Dãnia Davy, a Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund, as well as Karla Gibson, Karla Gibson, also the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. So put your hands together for a warm welcome to Dãnia and Karla.
Good morning. So my name is Dãnia Davy, and I serve as the Director of Land Retention and Advocacy at the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund. I'm joined by one of our members, an heir property landowner, Ms. Karla Gibson, who's going to be sharing some of her experiences as well. But before giving the mic over to Karla, I wanted to share a little bit more about the Federation for those of you who may not be familiar with our organization and our work. So the mission of the Federation is to be a catalyst for the development of self-supporting communities through cooperative economic development, land retention, and advocacy. We're actually chartered here in Washington, D.C., and we assist members in the following states: Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, Missouri, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, and West Virginia, focusing on the needs of Black farmers, landowners, and cooperatives. In 1967, 22 cooperatively owned business owners and leaders of the civil rights and Black cooperative development movements agreed to charter a nonprofit cooperative association, the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. In 1980, Congress commissioned the Emergency Land Fund to conduct the first research study on heirs property, the impact of heir property on Black land tenure in the southeastern region of the United States. In 1985, the Federation merged with the Emergency Land Fund to form the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund. Our areas of programmatic focus include cooperative development, and that work is coordinated primarily through our regional marketing system to give farmers better access to markets through a cooperative economic strategy. Our agroforestry work is centered at our Rural Training and Research Center in Epes, Alabama, and we also have our Regional Heirs Property and Mediation Center, through which we provide our land retention and advocacy services. I'm going to give a really quick overview of our overall, the Federation's overall policy priorities for the Farm Bill, but I wanted to just acknowledge that we have many of our members of our Advocacy Institute, and these are members who wanted to learn more about advocacy and wanted to be very engaged in the process of helping us shape and formulate our priorities. As a cooperative, we are tasked with having a democratic decision-making process. So that process for us started last year, the beginning of last year, and we hosted a series of monthly listening sessions. Those recommendations from the Advocacy Institute members were then delivered to the legal team, who made recommendations to the leadership of the organization. That platform was then presented to our full membership at our August annual meeting. And so all of the priorities that I'm going to go over today come directly from our members. And I think it's just really important to recognize that we have a wide variety of our members, and we're also supported by partners from the Virgin Islands. So many of the states that I named in the overview of the states that we serve are represented in this room today. And I just think it's really important to acknowledge how much of their work went into what you're about to hear today. So we support racial equity and credit access by increasing the FSA microloan limit from $50,000 to $100,000. We support racial equity and credit access by aligning the FSA farm ownership and farm operating loan limit at $600,000. We support racial equity and credit by prohibiting FSA loan collateralization of a farmer's primary residence and to no more than 100% of the value of the loan. And at this point, I want to allow Karla a chance to share a little bit about her story and her experience.
Okay. Thank you, Dãnia. Hope everyone can hear me. Good morning, everyone. Dãnia is the expert. I'm just going to give you a little bit of my story, okay? And my story will sound familiar because it's the story of many of you sitting in the audience. And unfortunately, there were many that came before us that didn't have the benefit of this type of audience to share and to get feedback and to take action. So my great-grandfather died without leaving a will. And during his lifetime, of course, he saw property and assets passed to the next generation for white families around him, but of course he lacked the knowledge, right, of the particulars of what we call estate planning today that served to bind the assets to families across the generations. So, but being able to leave heirs property for my great-grandparents was kind of a badge of honor because he had property to leave his heirs, right? But he didn't realize that his good intentions to leave land to be shared by all of his heirs didn't secure the property, but in dangerous contrast could lead to an eventual loss, right? So he had 8 children, 5 of whom left our home seat in Gadsden County, never to come back in the 1940s. 3 who stayed passed away. So about 3 years back, I visited home again and began to really realize the imperative of maintaining my ancestral land legacy. So I set out to use all available resources to make sure that that land was productive again, and hence my contact with the Federation. So over the past 3 years, under the guidance of the Federation, thank you, I've been able to do the work of retaining attorneys and collecting deeds and understanding the probate property process and ordering surveys and appraisals, and all in preparation to clear title so that I can buy out the interest of the remaining heirs. As a part of this heirs property journey, there's been a labor of love that has been wonderful. I've been able to bring my family back together. We hadn't gathered on that land in over 40 years. So I've been able to trace that history back to 1790. I can tell my family our story. They know exactly where we come from, that resilient branch of people that we sprang from. And now we're connecting in so many different ways. I have a vision that my great-grandparents' land will be productive again, but it's not going to happen without the access to capital. I've been able to do those small things, the attorneys and, you know, the surveys and stuff like that. I've been able to do that out of pocket, but there's going to come a time very soon when those large investments will be necessary, and I don't have those funds readily available. So I'm asking, so for me to clear title and purchase the heirs' interest, now to remove my ancestral land from heirs property status, it's going to be critical that the heirs property relending program that Dãnia referenced be fully implemented and available to me in combination with the Debt for Nature program, but then also with flexible terms that work well for my family, for the long term, for our land, because we don't want to bring land out of legal peril. We don't want to bring it out of legislative peril just to put it into financial peril, right? So I need that, and so many others in this audience need the same thing. And then furthermore, once I get that land cleared, then of course I'm looking to the next generation. I have 3 children that will prayerfully come alongside me and then succeed me, you know, in this legacy journey. And so to leave that land for them, I need for that land to be healthy and sustainable and productive for generations to come. And so the expanding of the conservation set-asides for Black farmers and landowners and ranchers from 5% to 13 or whatever it can be is crucial for this work. So thank you so much for hearing me this morning. This is my story, and it's the story of so many like me. And just know that if this work is not done, then another Black farmer is lost. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karla. That was amazing. And just to put a finer point on the policy priorities that Karla referenced in her story, the Federation supports racial equity and conservation programs with no less than 13% conservation program funding set aside for Black farmers and landowners. And she specifically names the Air Property Relending Program. We would like to see improvements made to the existing Debt for Nature program, wherein once a family borrows money from the Air Property Relending Program to clear title and do that preliminary work, once they have that clear title and can avail themselves of broader conservation programs, conservation easements to both generate resources for the land as well as to improve the health of the natural resources that are there, that they can get forgiveness for at least 70% of that loan amount, so that, as Karla said, they're not replacing one form of the risk of loss with another. Thank you so much. Are there any questions? So we'll take one question if there are any.
Yes,
If you could just stand and.
okay, all right. Shirley Blake, the Federation of Southern Florida. Your story was wonderful, wonderful. The question I have, you just kind of shed a little light, you spoke about out the interest. If you kind of elaborate, give us a little knowledge on that, please.
Absolutely. So one of the uses of the Air Property Relending funds is that an heir, such as Karla, can use some of that monies so that if one of her siblings or one of the other heirs that owns some fractionated interest in the property gives her a price that would allow her to buy them out, she can then consolidate her fractionated interest with theirs. And as she goes around, she can basically buy out other heirs that are not interested in ongoing management of the property, not interested in ongoing decision-making around the property. And so that the more that they can consolidate those interests, the less susceptible that property becomes to being lost.